Hello, brothers and sisters. It's time to look into the book of Galatians, and we're going slowly on purpose. No doubt you've noticed this. We're not desiring to get through the book of Galatians, but rather to learn and grow and change. And this week I just want to consider one subject with you, and Paul says in Galatians 1:11, I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that the gospel I preached to you is not of human origin. The gospel I preached is not of human origin. The gospel did not originate with man. It's God's message. And in contrast to the gospel that the false teachers were teaching the Galatians, Paul's message was a revelation from God. And the one thought from this verse is that man did not invent the gospel. God did. Now, think about this. If man had invented a religion, it would be about him working his way up to God, climbing a ladder to heaven, as it were. Each good work he does is another step in that ladder, getting him closer to God. It's illustrated in Genesis chapter 11, if you remember how people set about to build a tower that reached up to heaven, and how many of us tried to reach God by climbing out of our sin, by adding one brick of good works onto another, so that we might finally reach God. But God's gospel is about God coming down to us, stepping lower and lower in his humiliation, his love driving him from the throne to a cross, from the highest heaven to a hole in the earth. Each step lower, driven on by his love for you and his desire to rescue you and raise you up. Man's gospel would be about us seeing our horrible spots and blemishes and setting out to scrub them off, working tirelessly to be better so that we can look good to God. God's gospel is Jesus taking on our sin, becoming sin for us, looking hideous in appearance, unrecognizable as a man, that we might be the righteousness of God in him, beautiful in appearance to him. Man's gospel would be us in poverty, working hard to change our lives so we could be rewarded with a few pennies from God for our effort. God's gospel is about Jesus becoming poor, impoverished, for us in order to deposit $1 million into our account. The full righteousness of God being credited to us as a gift. Once there was a young man who he tried so hard but could just never please his father. He was never good enough. He never measured up. Every time he opened his mouth, his father condemned what he said, and every time he tried to do something to please his father, it was never good enough. So he finally learned to live in silence. He gave up in trying to be good enough. But he finally found rest and peace through God's gospel, when he saw that every sin was removed and laid on Jesus. And he, this young man, was viewed as good as Jesus was, as righteous as God himself. God's gospel changed his life. And I finally got to share that good news with my father in his remaining years and watch him be affected by the good news. I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that the gospel I preached is not of human origin. It's not from man, it's from God. And God's gospel comes with the power to change every person who believes it. Question for this week: is the gospel you believe from God or from man? And how do you know?